It was Wednesday night, and it hit me. I'd completely forgot. It was on my list of things to do, and I meant to do it earlier in the day, and then I got a phone call, and I got sidetracked, and then I came into the office, and it was just, everything was going crazy. And Wednesday night, it dawned on me I forgot to get the tickets. So I told the boys earlier in the week I was going to take them down to see the Reds play the Brewers. We were going to go down to Milwaukee and see one of the games, and I was going back and forth on whether that was going to be Thursday night or Friday, and we finally decided on Friday, so I was going to buy the tickets on Wednesday, and I forgot to do it, and I'd looked up the seats that we were going to buy, and they were good seats, and it was a cheap price, and I was really excited about it, and then I checked Wednesday night, and they'd been snatched up, and I was like, oh, no, and so there were some tickets available. They were a little more expensive, but they were in a good section, and I'm like, all right, it's the Reds. It's my favorite team. I'll do it. So I buy the seats, but I'm kicking myself all night Wednesday night because if I would have pulled the trigger earlier, would have been in this location and would have been a little less. And you know, just going back and forth on that. And Thursday, it's still lingering a little bit. I'm not sure what that says about me, but it's still lingering a little bit. But you know, Friday is the day of the game. We pick up everybody from school. We head down straight to Milwaukee. We get there, we go in, we hope for autographs. One of the Reds was signing. The boys just missed out on it. So there we are, you know, no ball from batting practice, no autograph. But we're still there to see the Reds play the Brewers. It's Major League Baseball. It's a great night. We're going through the first 4.5 innings. For those of you who don't follow baseball, the Reds are the away team, so they hit first. And they did not have a single hit through 5 innings, which is not good at all. It's good if you're a Brewers fan, but if you're a Reds fan, it's not exactly encouraging. And the thing is, on Monday night, they scored 14 runs, which is a lot for baseball, and then they did not score any runs in their games on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Yes, they played all 3 days and set a major league record in the process. So that's what we're going to cheer for. And we go, and we're halfway through the game, and don't get me wrong, we've got good seats. But we're watching bad baseball. And the boys ran and got something. And then they come back to our seats, and they're like, hey, somebody just gave us these. They asked, are you a family of 4? And we said yes. And they are holding front row tickets directly behind the Reds on-deck circle. Now, for those of you who are not baseball fans, there is a circle that the player, before they go to the plate to bat, they warm up at that circle. And all that's between us and the player is now a net. And we got to go, it's the best seats I've ever sat in my entire life. Somebody just handed them to them. We go down, and we are right there. You can see in their dugout. You can see their routine. For a baseball nerd like myself, it's fascinating to watch the players as they go through a different routine and what their routine it was absolutely incredible. It was absolutely incredible. And as we're down there, I hear a fan say from behind us, why did they get to sit there? Why do Reds fans get those seats? And I just let it go. But I wanted to turn around and be like, because they were given to me. And I didn't, but I wanted to. And we sat there in this incredible seats, and we watched the rest of the game, and it was just a phenomenal experience that we got on Friday night. And this morning, as we continue our look through the book of Mark, we're going to see a couple different responses in the hours leading up to the crucifixion of Jesus. And today, there's no chance we could walk through the entire chapter of Mark 14 together. So what we're going to do is we're just going to highlight a few different responses as we continue our look at the life and ministry of Christ. If you have your phones or your tablets, I'd invite you to follow along with us this morning in the Bible app. It's a free resource that you can find in whatever app store you utilize on your device. And once you have the Bible app installed on your device, there's a feature that we use together each and every week. It's called the Events feature. Either enable your locations or right in Lakeside, Algoma will pop up, and you can follow along with us that way. If you have a traditional Bible with you this morning, we are in the book of Mark. Mark is the second book in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, and again, we're going to be going through portions of chapter 14 together, and if you're joining us via the stream this morning, Thanks for joining us. My name is Brian. I'm part of the team here at Lakeside, and the verses will be available for you on the screen below. Mark chapter 14, beginning in verse 3, we read this. And while Jesus, was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclining at table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly. And she broke the flask and poured it over his head. Now, Jesus is here, and we're told that he's at Simon the leper's house, and that's fascinating in and of itself. It's not really all that surprising if you've been journeying with us through the book of Mark, as you've seen Jesus encounter all types of people. But there was a stigma, social stigma, around people who were infected, who had infectious diseases. There's a social stigma around lepers and leprosy. They'd be outcast. There were portions and places that they were not welcome, portions of society and places in society that they could not go. And here is Jesus in the home of Simon the leper. And there's a woman that Mark does not name for us, and she has a jar, an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard. And we're told it's very costly. And she breaks it and pours this over the head of Jesus. There were some who said to themselves indignantly, "Why was this ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor," and they scolded her. Now, 300 denarii probably doesn't mean much to you because it's not our currency, but 300 denarii is the equivalent of a year's wages. A year's wages is what this cost. And she breaks it and pours it over the head of Jesus. And onlookers see this, and they are indignant, we're told, as they're thinking about the cost. And have you ever noticed? You ever notice the critics are happy to tell you how other people should spend their money? But they see this, and they're indignant about it. And of course, it's always something else that can be raised. And so in this instance, well, that money could have been given to the poor. And so they wrap their indignation in that accusation. All this money that was just poured over the head of Jesus, all of that could have been used instead for the poor. That would have been a better use. That's what's going on in the context. And Jesus said, verse 6 tells us, "Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them. But you will not always have me." So Jesus shuts down the critics, and he shuts down the criticism. And he says the reality is this: you will always have poor people. You will always have the poor among you. And at any point that you want, you can go do something about it. Instead of being indignant about what this woman has just done to me, go do something about it yourself. Yourself. Jesus says poverty has always been in this broken and flawed world, and there will always be poverty in this broken and flawed world. And the response of Jesus is not only on the fact that there will always be poverty, but he makes it personal to them. He says, instead of just sitting here and being a critic of what somebody else has done, if you're so concerned, go do something about it yourself. And then Jesus highlights what the woman has done for him. He goes on, "She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial, and truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. Jesus says, this act that you have a problem with, this act that you're indignant about, this act will live forever. Now, here's what I want you to recognize. That in the moment, this act was incredibly costly. A year's worth of wages. A year's salary. It's incredibly costly. Not only was this act incredibly costly in that it cost a year's worth of wages, but it was criticized. Onlookers who saw it did not understand. Onlookers who saw it did not like it. They weren't just moderately bothered by it. They were indignant about what had just transpired. It was costly. It was criticized. And it's remembered forever. And the reason that this is so important is because sometimes we see the things that God has called us to, but we also see the cost. Or sometimes we know the things that God has called us to, but we recognize if we pursue that, there's going to be some criticism. And we can look back at this event and we can be like, what an incredible act of worship. And it was. But don't gloss over the fact that it is a year's worth of money and a party full of people who don't like it. That's what's going on here. Jesus says, this act, it will be memorialized forever. And wherever the story of what I am about to do is told, this act will be told as well. Then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. And he sought an opportunity to betray him. So what I love about the way that Mark records this is the immediate contrast that he provides. We transition from this incredibly costly and this criticized act of worship where this woman anoints the head of Jesus, and then we go to the celebrated act of Judas. That Judas agrees to betray Jesus, and the religious leaders applaud it. And not only do they celebrate his decision, but they say, we're going to pay you. We're going to pay you. The contrast could not be more clear. The next few verses of Mark set the scene for us as Jesus sends some of his disciples to prepare a place in the Passover meal. And then we jump down to verse 17. And when it was evening, he came with the 12. And as they were reclining at table and eating, Jesus said, truly I say to you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me. And they began to be sorrowful and to say to him one after another, is it I? And he said to them, it is one of the 12, one who is dipping bread into the dish with me. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born. So now the Passover meal. And I'm fascinated by this as Jesus declares, one of you is going to betray me. I'm fascinated by this response as one after another responded with the question, is it I? Is it I? I'm fascinated by this question and what it represents. What the responses of the disciples represents about us, about human nature, about the duality that lives within all of us, about what we're capable of, that we sometimes diminish and sometimes push away and sometimes don't acknowledge. But here, the question that is prevalent on the disciples' mind, men that have followed him for over 3 years, am I going to be the one that betrays you? Am I going to be that one? Jesus says, woe to who it will be. It would be better for them to have not been born. And as they were eating, he took bread, and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to them and said, take, this is my body. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank of it. And he said to them, this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. And Jesus again tells his disciples about the sacrifice that he's been setting them up for. The entire reason that he came in the first place. And the events that would unfold hours later. As Jesus gives them a picture in the first communion of the cost of the sacrifice for our sin. And truly I say to you, I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus said to them, you will all fall away, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. Jesus continued to tell them what would occur, and he warned them that they would all fall away. And yet, Jesus also promises resurrection and hope. And that's the message of Jesus, that you're all going to fall away. And Peter said to him, verse 29 tells us, even though they all fall away, I will not. And Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he said emphatically, if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And they all said the same. Now Jesus tells the disciples, you're all going to scatter. And Peter says, Lord, these other guys, we've known that all along. But not me. I'm not. I will die. I will die. But I will not deny you. I will not flee. I'm not weak like these other. I am with you. I am by your side. Ride or die, you and I. We are, yep. I know we can't count on these other guys, but not me. And Jesus says, Peter, no, you too. You too are going to deny me. You're going to run away. And Peter is adamant. I would rather die than deny you. They then went to the Garden of Gethsemane. And we proceed to verse 43. And immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12. And with him a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, the one I will kiss is the man. Seize him and lead him away under guard. And when he came, he went up to him at once and said, Rabbi, and he kissed him. And they laid hands on him and seized him. There's Judas, who Mark told us earlier in chapter 14 had already arranged this with the religious leaders. He shows up on the scene. He encounters Jesus. He calls him Rabbi. And he kisses him. Is now revealed to all to be the betrayer. The one they thought they could trust. They made him, he was so trustworthy, in charge of the money. And yet, here he is. His true motives, his true motivations, his true character, it's revealed. For 3 years, when Jesus would go places, the disciples were there. By all appearances, these are the closest followers. And amidst them, the betrayer. I invite you to go back and consider the question that all the disciples asked in the upper room as Jesus foretold this, as he prophesied this. Is it I? And sometimes there can be a false sense of security about us all. I invite you to go back and remember the conversation of Peter, as we're going to see how that story unfolds in just a minute. I will never deny you. But one of those who stood by drew a sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus said to them, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me, but let the scriptures be fulfilled." And they all left him and fled. Now, Mark doesn't tell us, but John does. John is more than happy to throw Peter under the bus for this one and let us all know that it was Peter who took the sword out, and Peter who struck the guard, and Peter who cut his ear off. And if you go back to the conversation that we just looked at, it kind of all makes sense. That Peter and Jesus had a conversation where Peter said, "Jesus, these other guys, they're going to fall away. They're going to abandon you. But I'm not. I will die before I deny you. I will die before I deny you." And so the guards show up, and Peter's already said, "Hey, I'm willing to die." And he takes the sword, and I don't know if the guard's really quick in his response or if Peter should have just stuck to fishing. I'm not really sure how we get an ear cut off in the whole thing. But notice verse 50. And they all left him and fled. Every one of them who had walked with Jesus runs away. They all flee. And a young man followed him, with nothing but a linen cloth about his body. And they seized him, but he left the linen cloth and ran away naked. Now, I don't know what in the ADHD is going on with Mark here when he tells us this, but think about this for a moment. Jesus has been arrested by guards who are armed. All the disciples have run away. They've all left. And here is someone. All they have on is a linen cloth. They don't have on armor. They aren't ready to fight or to get away quickly or easily. They're unprepared. But they're following. They're noticed, and they go, and they try to detain him, and he gets away. And now we've got a streaker running around the city of Jerusalem because he's running away from the guards. They've got his linen cloth. He's naked. He's running around. And everybody's gone. Everybody's fled. Jesus was taken before religious leaders and accused of crimes. He was spit upon. He was beaten. And then Peter comes back on the scene. And we resume in verse 66. And as Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came, and seeing Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, "You also were with the Nazarene Jesus." But he denied it, saying, "I neither know nor understand what you mean." And he went out into the gateway, and the rooster crowed. And the servant girl saw him and began again to say to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again he denied it. And after a little while, the bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." But he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, "I do not know this man of whom you speak." And immediately the rooster crowed a second time. And Peter remembered how Jesus had said to him, "Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down and wept. Peter is accused, and he lies. Peter is said, "Certainly you are one of his followers." Certainly, he says, "I don't even know him." And the second crow of the rooster happens. Peter is completely wrecked. He's completely wrecked. So, in all of this, I want us to think about the people that we've encountered throughout Mark chapter 14. We've encountered a woman who, in spite of great cost and in spite of criticism, did a profound act of worship. It was costly and it was criticized. And Jesus said, "It was so beautiful, it will be remembered forever. And wherever my story is told, so will this act." Because she didn't care about the cost. And she didn't care about the criticism. And we go from that to the contrast of Judas, who for 3 years walked with Jesus, and everybody who saw the ministry of Jesus would have said, there's somebody who's a follower. There's somebody who's really tight with God. There's somebody we can trust. And there's somebody who would betray Jesus, who would be celebrated and applauded and enriched, and ultimately be a betrayer. And then there's a guy, and we don't know much about him, but we know everybody else has run away, and he's still following. And then they go to detain him, and he gets away, and he runs away, but he was still following for a while. Even when everybody else had left. And then there's Peter and the other remaining 10 disciples. And Peter tells Jesus, hey, all these other guys, they're going to run away, but I don't care if I have to die. I will not deny you. And Peter tries to fight when they come to arrest Jesus. And hours later, he returned to the scene. And yet ultimately, when he was questioned, he denies ever knowing Jesus. We like to compartmentalize. We like to put people into certain categories. The reality is it's very difficult to do. Because within us all is the potential for us to do incredible things in service to God. And within us all is the potential for us to act like Peter. And if you think that's not true about yourself, I would invite you to the question of the disciples around the first communion. As Jesus said, one of you will betray me. And they all questioned, is it I? And let me tell you what I find the most fascinating thing in all of this is in the midst of our frailty, in the midst of our flaws, God still loves us. And the redemption of Jesus is available to us in the biggest moments of our weakness, and when we have failed, and when we have run away, He has never abandoned us. And that's the message of the gospel. Is it's not because of what you've done, because you can't. But it's because of what He did and because of who He is that we can find salvation and redemption because of His sacrifice for us. Jesus, thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for loving us. Even when we fail, even when we flee, God, I pray that as we follow you, we would not be frightened of the cost. God, I pray that as we follow you, we would not listen to the criticism. God, I pray that as we worry about being celebrated, we would worry only about being celebrated by you. God, I pray that as we're passionate about following you, you will take our passions and work within us. That there wouldn't be a false sense of security
or comfort that comes about from that. And God, that we would never lose sight of the fact that when we fail, when we find ourselves in situations that are our own flaws and our own sin, and we find ourselves in the midst of shame and all the things that our choices bring about, that we would not lose sight of the fact that your sacrifice is what saves us. And it's available to all who would accept it by confessing their sin and inviting you, Jesus, to be Lord of their lives as they embrace your sacrifice on the cross and your resurrection 3 days later. Be glorified and magnified in us, Jesus, for your glory. It's in your name, the name of our Savior, we pray.